Welcome to the NeuroHeir podcast, the show for cycle breakers, parents, young adults, and helping professionals ready to understand their nervous system through a generational lens, heal what isn't theirs to carry, and consciously choose what comes next. Hi, I'm your host, Leanna Hunt, an associate clinical mental health counselor and certified performance coach. Each week, you'll get stories, science, and somatic practices, plus my signature 4N framework: notice, name, nurture, and navigate, to help you honor resilience, break silence, and build deeper connection with yourself and those you love, all while shaping a legacy of safety, freedom, and possibility. Welcome back to the NeuroHeir podcast. Last week, we explored your body's safety map, how fight, flight, freeze, and appease responses protect us and have protected our families for possibly a really long time. Today, we're widening the lens to see how those same patterns travel through generations. This is the beginning of what I call legacy repair. When I began weaving neuroscience, somatic therapy, and generational work together for my book, the word NeuroHeir came to me. It didn't exist, and so I had to create it. A NeuroHeir is someone who consciously tends to their nervous system inheritance. It's the person in the lineage who says, what my body carries ends with awareness. It's never about being perfect, and I hope you guys remember that, but it is about being present. For years, the phrase cycle breaker defined this kind of work. But as I deepened the NeuroHeir concept, I realized I didn't want to only break something, I wanted to repair it. I've watched so many people distance themselves from family in hopes of healing, but distance alone doesn't create repair. The people who truly transform are those who engage in nervous system repair across generations. They go first, not to sever, but to restore. So maybe like me, you're not here to break cycles. Maybe you're here to repair the inheritance. Maybe you're here to connect and reconnect what trauma severed. And maybe you're here to remember who your lineage was before survival became the story. And I need you guys to all hear this and remember that I said this. I know that some relationships are not repairable, and that reality to me really matters. Legacy repair does not mean re-entering unsafe situations, but it does mean reclaiming your own system so you don't pass the pattern forward. A NeuroHeir notices what no longer serves, brings compassion to the body's protection patterns, and chooses what continues to the next generation. And I share this from my own lens as a white woman living in the US with privilege. For many, silence was never a choice. It was a survival within racial, cultural, or political trauma. Legacy repair will look different for everybody. And please let this just be the invitation to have compassion for what's yours to shift, what's within your control. For years, I thought healing meant distancing myself from my dad, believing that if I stayed far enough away from his anger and his silence and the pains of my childhood, I would not carry them anymore. But the body doesn't only need distance. The body needs understanding. A few weeks ago, while praying one morning, I felt prompted to find my dad's old journals, the ones he gave me about a year before he passed away. They were from 1975 to 1977. When he was 19 to 21 years old, and he was serving an LDS mission in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And what's crazy is his mission started in September of 75. So I started reading these journals exactly when he started writing them 50 years ago. Page after page, he wrote about what he called his nervousness, his fears of not being good enough, of letting people down or feeling different. And I know in the 70s, no one was using the word anxiety, that I can find anyway. But for me, I know that when he says nervousness, that this is what it is. Reading his words from 50 years ago, I started to see myself, the same thoughts trying to do everything right. The unfortunate part is that we never talked about any of this when he was alive. And for much of my life, I was pretty afraid of my dad, which is really hard to say out loud. But through those journals, I began to meet a younger version of him, the part that was anxious, trying to not disappoint anyone, and overcoming his own fears about himself. And through that, I have begun to meet a gentler version of me. Legacy repair begins when we look at our family's patterns with compassion instead of condemnation. There's a study from Poland that changed how I think about silence. In 2022, there were a few researchers, and their last names are hard to say, so I'm going to say Daniele is one of them, examined a national sample of families whose ancestors survived World War II. They measured how much descendants actually knew about what their families endured and compared that to their mental and physical well-being. The findings were striking. Descendants who knew the least about their family's wartime experiences, the ones whose families stayed silent, showed the highest levels of stress and trauma-related symptoms and the lowest sense of embodiment, which is that inner feeling of being present and safe inside one's own body. Silence, once a necessary survival response, had started to become a physiological inheritance. And when families finally shared their stories in safe, compassionate ways, participants described relief, coherence, and even bodily calm. That's legacy repair in action. It's not about fixing the past, but it is about integrating its truth so the body can rest again. Next week, we're going to go deeper into this research and talk about what family secrets do to the nervous system and how silence becomes embodiment. But I wanted to mention it here so you guys can at least start thinking about it. When I first read that study, it was like, this is what I believe. And here it is, like right in front of my face. These were families who'd lived through unimaginable trauma. And yet, what made the biggest difference for their children and grandchildren wasn't how strong they were or how much they overcame. It was whether or not their stories were spoken out loud. And that made me wonder, what stories in my own life were never told? What silence have I mistaken for strength? So before we move on, I want to invite you just to pause with me for a moment, not to analyze or fix anything, just to notice. These next questions are an invitation to curiosity, to begin seeing the invisible threads between what your ancestors may have lived through and what your nervous system might still be carrying today. You can write them down or just let them land in your body as you listen and ponder. There's no right way to handle these questions. I want it to just be what feels best to you. You can write them down in a journal and then take them to an ancestor if that feels like something that would be helpful for you, and actually write down their answers. So here's the questions, and I want you to go through them with me. Are there stories in your family that were never told, or could there be? How did silence, secrecy, or we don't talk about that shape your idea of safety and love? Are there family patterns that helped your ancestors survive? And which of those same patterns now create stress or distance? What historical events such as wars, migrations, pandemics, economic crashes, persecution, or natural disasters might have shaped your lineage's nervous systems? How does your body respond when you imagine those experiences? And you think about that now, even me asking them, do you notice your body getting really tight? Do you notice your heart rate and your breath speeding up? Do you notice a sense of just wanting to check out completely? What questions could you ask an old family member or yourself to begin uncovering stories with compassion? And I want you to think about your own unique family system and your situation and your lineage. What would you want to know specifically about your family? And what would repair, not breaking, what would that actually look like for you within your family system? And lastly, if you became your family's first NeuroHeir, what might shift in the generations after you? What might shift in your own lifetime, watching in your own children's lives, and then in future generations to come? As you sit with those questions, I want you just to notice what happens in your body. Maybe you feel warmth or tension or tears or even nothing at all. Just remember that that is your own nervous system communicating in real time with you. This is the heart of becoming a NeuroHeir. Learning to see these reactions not as something wrong with you, but as information. They're your body's way of saying, here's where repair wants to begin. So let's bring this into the language of the nervous system, how these inherited survival patterns live in us, and how we can begin to shift them with awareness. Our nervous system is shaped by survival. Each generation does what it must to stay safe. Fight says, I've got to control it. Flight says, I'll outrun it. Freeze says, I'll disappear. And appease says, I'll keep the peace. Through the NeuroHeir survival map, which we explored last episode, you can begin noticing where your system lives most often. And through the 4 Ns, you learn to bring compassion and regulation back to those patterns. So again, the 4 Ns, we're just going to touch on them quickly. And just notice what your body's feeling as we went through those questions. Notice the pattern your own body has learned to survive. Can you name it without shame? What would that be like for you to actually say out loud what you notice in your body? Then nurture. Can you nurture your own system with safety and compassion? What would that look like for you to offer yourself compassion? And lastly, navigate. Navigate towards new choices that align with healing. Over time, this is how we move from autopilot survival to conscious legacy repair and how we embody what it means to be a NeuroHeir. Remember, guys, legacy repair isn't about fixing what came before it, but it is about changing your relationship to it. Being a NeuroHeir means you become the place where awareness meets compassion, where what was once reactive becomes responsive. You are not just the product of what you've been through. You are the turning point. If today's conversation resonated, please make sure to follow the NeuroHeir podcast and leave a review. Share it with someone who's ready to move from breaking to repairing. Next week, we'll dive into the cost of silence, how family secrets shape the body. Until then, may your body feel safe enough to listen and brave enough to repair. And as always, please feel free to send me a message to my Instagram, Aligning with Leanna. I love those conversations there that we can have. And if there's something you find in these questions and in this deep dive and you want to share with me, and you want me to bring that into an episode and keep it confidential, I can totally do that. I would love to weave what you guys are learning and finding into this work. So until next time, have a great day. Thanks for listening. Bye.